What's up, everyone? Welcome to, I guess, the void of space, the depths, the darkness. I've got some video game news stories for you today. First up, some interesting discourse has crept up around The Last of Us Part 2 Remaster. Obviously, there's people who are adamantly against the remaster for a game that's only a couple of years old. There's people debating whether or not this is enough of a value add. I think it's a $10 upgrade if you already own the game. So the game does include director commentary. You can listen to Neil Druckmann talk about different decisions they made while you're playing through the game. That's really neat. A lot of games don't have that. So that's cool to see. There is upgraded performance. Then there's also the new roguelite mode, which we'll talk about. So to kick it off, let's take a look at the review written by Digital Trends. This is kind of the initial argument and criticism I saw against The Last of Us 2 Remastered. That stuck out to me, that kind of encapsulated a lot of different people's opinions. It's the first one I saw, so let's start here. The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered turns the original game into a cruel punchline. This is by Giovanni Colantonio, posted January 16th. And basically, to summarize the review, Giovanni talks about how the premise of The Last of Us 2 as a narrative story and as kind of 30 to 40 hours addressing the cycle of violence that occurs through vengeance, right, is directly opposed to some of the new features found in the new Last of Us 2 Remaster, which is, of course, a roguelite mode as well as New Game Plus. Let's go through it. Giovanni writes, as a reward for finishing the brutal story, I had unlocked New Game Plus mode, which would encourage me to replay it again with all my upgraded guns. The benefit of the doubt I'd given Naughty Dog went out the window. Did the studio even understand its own game? Again, addressing the narrative issues that the game tackles for 30, 40 hours, just hitting you over the head with the kind of the moral lesson that an eye for an eye is a very, very bad thing, will descend you into madness and into like a vicious cycle that you will never escape from. Giovanni's basically pointing out, and a lot of critics have been pointing out, kind of the irony in that. But again, this is a video game. It's gonna video game. We'll get into it. Giovanni continues to write, isn't much of a remaster, though it does come with a visual upgrade. Those changes are largely negligible. For the most part, people are saying the upgraded graphics in the new version of The Last of Us 2 are nice, and the extra processing power and stuff is nice, but it's not super noticeable because just the original looks so dang good, and it's not that old. Giovanni continues, the main draw of the package is a new roguelike mode called No Return. He summarizes it saying, if you're the kind of person who doesn't care how gameplay informs narrative and only cares about pure entertainment, I'll get this out of the way early. It's just not fun. So this is a critique against the roguelike mode itself. And this is where I've seen people go both ways on it. Some people really do like the roguelike mode. They like the progression and stuff, which Giovanni says, admittedly, in this review that it's pretty decent in terms of like grinding out different rewards and things. But also I've seen takes like Giovanni's where people say they didn't like it. Continuing on, the more pressing issue with No Return is how mind-boggling awkward it is in context of The Last of Us Part 2. See, here's the meat of it. The base game is a deep meditation on cyclical violence, adapting the old eye for an eye saying into a grisly story. That's very, very long. And again, my personal experience is they really just, like by the end of that game, you're like, okay, I get it. Like, is Ellie ever going to learn her lesson here? And it just keeps going and keeps going. What better way is there to discuss how violence moves in cycles than with a run-based roguelike that traps players in an endless stream of shootouts? There's no narrative thread to set up a loaded premise or any packaging at all. Players simply load in, kill a whole bunch of people, unlock a funny t-shirt for their hero, and do it again. And then he goes on to say, after spending 25 hours playing through one of the most distressing interactive meditations on violence ever made, I'm expected to put it all aside and indulge in some morbid fun. It would be comedic if it weren't so bleak. So yeah, really just, I think everybody should probably read this piece start to finish to really get the full picture, but just to summarize, yeah, there's an ironic contrast between what the message of The Last of Us 2 is and what it portrays in terms of violence and the cyclical nature of vengeance versus what it's asking you to do in the upgraded version of it. And I can see both points, but like on one side, you got to remember this is a video game and people want to play it for the video game-ness of it, and they can probably set that aside from the narrative side of it. Some people are not going to be able to let that go as easily, as is proof of Giovanni's review here. And I think it's worth noting. It's a worthwhile discussion to kind of contemplate and have. Continuing on, Druckmann has previously noted that his inspiration for the story came from the conflict between Israel and Palestine. A traumatic image moved him to write a story about two factions going to war with one another and destroying each other's lives in the process. There is a very good piece written on Vice, which, if you think that's like a load of bullets or whatever, you should read this piece by Manuel Malberg, who was writing for Waypoint at the time, about the not so hidden Israeli politics of The Last of Us Part 2. It's just all there, and he's included screenshots and comparisons and things like that. This is an incredible read if you haven't read it. I think a lot of people are quick to read a headline like that and not really consider it and not push it off, but there's a lot of decent examples in here and interview segments and stuff that Emmanuel had to pull on to kind of talk about those influences. And before, when this piece came out, there was still violence, obviously, in Israel and Palestine and in Gaza, but it had not escalated to what we've recently experienced. So, in light of all that, I think this is even a more fascinating read. To finish out Giovanni's review here, he finishes with a really good thesis. I'm not going to read it for you. I think you should go and click into his article and read this. But yeah, he's basically just saying how it's just odd that there's this contrast between what the developers and I guess the company of Sony and Naughty Dog are asking players to do, considering the art of The Last of Us and its messaging and kind of what it all means when you kind of finish that game. And it certainly is an experience if you ever have finished it. And there's a lot to think about. I think I left that game feeling pretty upset and frustrated. And I think that's something that good arts tend to do, and I can understand like a lot of people who feel like they probably don't need this updated remaster, even though it is probably the best way to play the game, because that story is pretty harrowing and if you sit through it. And then there's other people who have played through it 4, 5, 6 times. So yeah, we're gonna leave it there for that one. I did have an example in here of someone else there's the GameRant review written by Dalton Cooper, who had written, at the end of the review, The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered is a more fully featured and overall superior version of an already incredible game. No return makes it worth the $10 upgrade by itself, and the game is an absolute must-buy for anyone who has never played the PS4 original. The lost levels are a bit of a letdown, and the graphics haven't gotten as much of an upgrade as so many had hoped, but this is still the definitive way to experience Naughty Dog's masterpiece. If you look on Twitter, there is a number of sites just reviewing this with perfect scores or pretty dang near close to it. Shinobi on Twitter posted a list from, perfect 10s from Screen Rant, GameSpew, PlayStation Brazil, PlayStation Universe, and pretty dang near close to it from Press Start, Gaming Nexus, and Destructoid. Benji Sales had another list, God is Geek, Varieties on here with a perfect 10, Screen Rant, perfect 10, Gaming Bible, 10, GameSpew, VGC. So a lot of people did like this game, but there is that interesting contrast. You can't really get away from it. And I think the creators of The Last of Us 2 probably know that contrast is in there. So an interesting story, kind of an interesting discourse online, and some interesting back and forth there. Next up, Embracer is conducting sizable layoffs at Lost Boys Interactive. This comes from Game Developer. This article is written by Chris Kerr, and it goes on to say, Lost Boys Interactive has confirmed the layoffs and claims the job cuts will enable it to succeed in spite of headwinds facing the industry right now. The story goes on, Embracer is cutting a, quote, sizable, unquote, number of jobs at Tiny Tina's Wonderland's co-developer, Lost Boys Interactive. A number of current and former Lost Boys Interactive employees shared the news on LinkedIn, including some who've been directly impacted by the layoffs. The quote reads, "It seems a sizable portion of Lost Boys Interactive was laid off today, including myself." That's from the former producer Jared Pace, who continues, "Still trying to understand the scope of it all, but sadly this is a song and dance we're all familiar with." So that's pretty much what it is. Not a lot about the number of people who were laid off from what I could tell. There was an update here which reads, "A spokesperson from Lost Boys Interactive has confirmed the layoffs in a statement sent to Game Developer and said the move was necessary in order to navigate challenging headwinds." The official response goes on to read, quote, "Unfortunately, this does mean we will separate from some of our team members and we're working closely with those affected. We know this is a hard time for this talented and experienced group of people and will provide support and assistance through this transition to those leaving." I haven't done stories about it or collecting the information around it, but we've already lost something around 2,500 game jobs this year. So yeah, we're already off to a terrible start for 2024. We know the video game industry is a volatile industry, but at this point it's just getting so ridiculous. All right, moving on. Ubisoft Exec says gamers need to get comfortable with not owning your games. Now, this is a headline that I've seen regurgitated on a couple different sites. This particular one is from The Gamer, written by Joshua Robertson, where I was looking for the direct quote of this, and I think it's been twisted up a little bit for sensationalism. I'm not accusing The Gamer of doing this. Generally a very good publication in my opinion. But the way it was kind of spreading online, I thought I would cover this story and kind of talk about it. So where this quote actually comes from is from an interview on gamesindustry.biz. The title of this article is "The New Ubisoft Plus and Getting Gamers Comfortable with Not Owning Their Games." And this was written by Christopher Dring. Initially, it starts off about, just as the title suggests, Ubisoft Plus and subscription services. The article starts, "Ubisoft has rebranded its subscription offering and introduced a new service for PC players. Ubisoft's main all-singing, all-dancing subscription offering has been rebranded Ubisoft Plus Premium. This service is the one that features all new releases, such as this week's Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, which is available early to subscribers. It costs $17.99 a month, I'm assuming, and is accessible via PC, Xbox, and Amazon Luna." The article goes on to read, "There's a lot of debate around subscription in video games. Today, the business model is the dominant way of paying for TV, film, and music, but that's not currently the case in the games industry. Games are typically much longer. Many of them are free or feature some other form of monetization, and AAA publishers have argued that the numbers just don't add up." Intermixed in this article are interview quotes from Felipe Tremblay, who's the director of subscriptions at Ubisoft. He goes on to say in the article, "The point is not to force users to go down one route or another. We offer purchase, we offer subscription, and it's the gamer's preference that is important here. We are seeing some people who buy choosing to subscribe now, but it all works." So he's already kind of started off hedging both bets, right? He's not saying one over the other, which isn't like what the other headlines and tweets and stuff made it out to appear. Tremblay goes on to say, "One of the things we saw is that gamers are used to a little bit, like DVD, having and owning their games. That's the consumer shift that needs to happen. They got comfortable not owning their CD collection or DVD collection. That's a transformation that's been a bit slower to happen in games." So it's about feeling comfortable with not owning your game. And that's where this part of the quote has been coming, right? Not owning your game, that comes in here. This is the quote from "not owning your games," which isn't even a direct quote. The plural is added there. I guess that's a liberty, but I saw this on a lot of other stories too. So not just calling out the gamer, I get it. I don't know what the news grind is. Obviously, you're trying to just make splashy headlines for SEO and in an honest way. So he did say the thing, right? So it's about feeling comfortable with not owning your game. And, obviously he's in charge of all of the subscription services at Ubisoft. So he would want people to become more comfortable with that so he can make more money. It's obviously not an unbiased thing. And so Ubisoft can make more money. But I just thought I'd point that out, make it a little more clear. This whole article by Dring is really good. Go read it if you have a chance. And it makes kind of sense from Ubisoft's perspective, obviously, but there's also a lot of us who like owning physical media. I personally buy a lot of digital, but I'll get physical stuff when it's a game I think is really special to me. Next up, Stalker 2 devs say the FPS was below the expected standards, so it's been delayed to September 2024. This comes from Games Radar. This article is written by Dustin Bailey, who writes, "Stalker 2 Heart of Chernobyl has been delayed to September 5th, 2024, which developer GSC Game World calls the game's final release date." That's a direct quote. There was a Twitter post, but since seems to have been deleted, so I'm not sure, and I don't think there's an update in the story about that. But they quote it here in the piece, saying that the studio had tweeted, "Throughout the frankly challenging development process, we understood the time was of the team's main essence. Seeing the scope of polishing and understanding that we can't push your patience too much, we were absolutely dedicated to releasing the game in Q1 2024, and we worked extra hard to meet the release window. That, however, doesn't change the fact that at the beginning of this year, we still witnessed the certain amount of technical imperfection that holds Stalker 2 below the expected standards for the final experience our fans are waiting for." That's probably translated. Remember, this developer was impacted by the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and so they had to stop work on the game because of that for a number of weeks or months, I'm not sure, but apparently they're back developing again. But and to see them not call that out and hear kind of an honorable approach, right? They're not blaming the conflict on the game being delayed. They're saying like, yeah, actually the game did have some problems when we looked at it and tried to work on it. So, kudos to them for pushing the game out. I know a lot of Stalker fans are going to be disappointed at the extra wait, but it's only a couple of months at the end of the day, or most of a year, I guess, or part of a year. In terms of video games, I feel like we can do that standing on our head. It's better to have the better game than a broken game at launch. Hopefully we'll see it in September when they say it's coming out. Here's another story from The Gamer. Rockstar's parent company is trying to stop Remedy from using this logo. Man, these logo disputes are always kind of silly. Take-Two is Rockstar's parent company, and you know, they don't want any other game company to use an R mainly as their logo. I mean, this says Remedy right under it, so this is kind of ridiculous. This is pretty much the story right here. There isn't much more to it than that. This story is written by Rhiannon Bevan, and it reads, Take-Two Interactive, Rockstar's parent company, is going after Alan Wake 2 developer Remedy. Take-Two is trying to stop Remedy from using its new logo, seeming to argue that it could be confused with Rockstar's own branding, which nobody's going to confuse these two logos, but you know, it's lawyer brains, right? They're trying to say like, well, if we let them slide, then someone else can make a logo even closer to it, and we have no legal grounds for saying that kind of a logo that more closely resembles ours isn't allowed. So it says, this was spotted by Respawn First, who noticed the trademark dispute on the website of the UK's Intellectual Property Office. Here are the filings for Remedy's new logo, which the studio started to use last year, show that Take-Two is disputing their use and is opposing Remedy's trademark over the design. The opposing filing doesn't go into much detail on Take-Two's dispute, but given that the logo features a stylized R, it is safe to assume that the company is taking this action on Rockstar's behalf. Rockstar's logo also uses a stylized R, albeit one that looks very different from Remedy's, with a unique font sitting atop yellow background. Here's the tweet. Remedy Entertainment and Take-Two Interactive are in trademark dispute over Remedy's logo. This is from Jake, who's at Respawn First. So this is the original kind of source of the material, and screenshots here depicting the trademark dispute. So there you have it. Take-Two does not want Remedy to use that R. Take-Two's a major, like a huge company. They could probably take the fan blowback. They obviously have a much larger audience too and more money. So we'll see how this shakes out. But I think someone from Rockstar probably comes to their senses and then maybe, hopefully tells Take-Two to chill out. But who knows with this stuff. Hopefully Remedy gets to keep their logo. Speaking of Rockstar, here's a headline that kind of made me scratch my head. Rockstar banned T-Pain from playing GTA Online RP, that stands for role playing, while he works on GTA 6, then bought the RP mod makers anyway. There's a quote in this headline that says, y'all told me I couldn't do this shit, then y'all teamed up with the people that enabled the RP shit to happen? This is posted on PC Gamer, written by Joshua Woolens, and the article reads, here are 2 things I learned today. 1, T-Pain of Buy You a Drink fame is working on Grand Theft Auto 6 in some capacity. 2, he's a major GTA Online roleplay fan and can often be spotted hanging out on the popular No Pixels RP server. I'm assuming this server runs mods for role-playing in GTA 5 with GTA 5 Online. And the story goes on to explain, in a recent Twitch stream, T-Pain mentioned that his work on GTA 6 had actually gotten in the way of his GTA Online double life. Quote, I used to be on No Pixel, then I started working on GTA 6, and Rockstar told me I couldn't do RP anymore. They had this whole speech like, what if somebody took your album and re-recorded it, and more people were listening to that? T-Pain went on to say, okay, I kind of get that, but I was having a good time. The author of the article, Woolens, goes on to write, the irony is, of course, that Rockstar's position eventually changed last year. The company acquired a CFX.re, which makes the mods on which servers like No Pixel are based. T-Pain noticed. T-Pain said, quote, then they teamed up with the people that make the RP shit. He continued, I'm like, wait a minute, what the fuck? Y'all told me I couldn't do this shit, then y'all teamed up with the people that enabled the RP shit to happen. Anyways, whatever. It seems like he's kind of taking it in high stride. He's going to get a lot of money for making music for or licensing his music on GTA 6. So he probably just laughing about the whole thing. And if there's GTA 6 online, he's probably going to be fine and happy. And eventually, I think then, like now that the mod is owned by Rockstar, either they're going to shut it down or find a way to like include the stuff that are in the mods on their own. And I'm curious to see what happens. If you're a Rockstar fan playing GTA Online, let me know what you think about this one. The Supreme Court declines appeals from Apple and Epic Games in the App Store case. I'm not sure if you guys have been paying attention to this. This article's on Engadget, written by Malik Salah. Saleh. I'm not sure if I pronounced that one right. I'm sorry if I got it wrong. The US Supreme Court has declined to hear the appeals filed by both Apple and Epic Games following a judge's ruling that Apple must allow developers to offer alternative methods to pay for apps and services other than through the App Store. It did not provide an explanation as to why it refused to review their appeal, but it means the permanent injunction, giving developers a way to avoid the 30% cut Apple takes, will remain in place. Apple made the appeal to High Court back in September of last year. As a result of the case that, if you remember, that Epic had made a trailer for, the case brought forward by Epic Games is the first to challenge the business model of the App Store, which helps Apple rake in billions. So if you remember, Epic sued Apple saying they had a monopoly over the App Store, and then there was a ruling in that case where eventually Apple was told that they can't exclusively sell content or take a 30% cut from developers, and there has to be a way to circumvent the App Store, basically. But Epic wasn't happy with the ruling either. The article reads, while the Ninth Circuit ruled in favor of Epic's appeal that Apple has indeed broken California's unfair competition law, no, that's what it is, unfair competition, it rejected Epic's claim that the App Store is a monopoly. In addition to declining to hear Apple's appeal, SCOTUS also will not reveal Epic's appeal that the district court had made legal errors. So yeah, they were kind of unhappy. They didn't get the full ruling that they wanted. So both these companies are kind of kicking and shouting, and none of it's gonna fly. So right now, until the the court decides ultimately what to do, there's basically this injunction which has kind of frozen the whole thing in the way that it is now. So currently people will be allowed to circumvent the App Store, and Apple has to provide a way for people to do that. But the court isn't willing to go all the way to say that Apple's creation of the App Store itself, existence, is a monopoly, right? So we're going to revisit this at some point, but that's kind of just where it's at for now. Next up, Square Enix confirms Foamstars contains some AI-generated art. This story is from VGC, written by Andy Robinson. If you didn't know, Foamstars is the kind of Splatoon clone that's being published by Square Enix. This article by Andy Robinson reads, and you can tell this is a good article because of how much I've highlighted here. Can we just take a second to acknowledge how good the writers and staff are at VGC? It's just pure information in the first 4, 5, 6, 7 paragraphs of this thing. Anyways, Square Enix has confirmed its upcoming PlayStation shooter Foamstars contains some AI-generated art. The Final Fantasy publisher's president recently said in a New Year's letter that it intended to be aggressive in applying AI in its future game development. Obviously, that's made a lot of people unhappy because AI is very controversial right now, and we're going to get into it. At a recent press event, VGC asked Foamstars producer Kosuke Okatani if AI was used for any elements of the game, and he confirmed it had. Okatani claimed that while the vast majority of the game was built by hand, it had used Midjourney, a popular generative AI tool that transforms text prompts into visual art to create a small number of art for in-game icons. Now, if you remember, Midjourney is a company that is currently been sued for using other people's artwork. And I know there's a lot of people who will defend AI, and I think AI is an interesting topic right now, but I think in this specific use case, in the way that Midjourney took advantage of Magic the Gathering, like as a franchise, as a brand, but also as the artist who works for that franchise and that brand, I think it's really messed up. And like that, there's no denying that. The article continues, the assets in question used in Foamstars are said to be related to in-game album covers for the game's music tracks. Okatani said, all of the core elements in Foamstars, the core gameplay and the things that make the game enjoyable, those are all made by hand. And then he said, however, we did want to experiment with AI as well. Obviously, developers are going to experiment with AI, I think, especially from the producer level or from the top down. There's going to be orders to experiment with AI because if they can make certain elements of their job easier, since games are so expensive to make, they're going to use those methods. That's just kind of the state of things, and so it's kind of frustrating to see, but that's what it is. Okatani goes on to say, in terms of the content in the game, this makes up about 0.01% or even less, but we have dabbled in it by creating these icons in the game. Square Enix later clarified in a statement provided to VGC, AI was used in the creation of the in-game album covers for the music featured in the Foamstars soundtrack. As developers, we're always looking at new technologies to see how they can assist with the game development. In this instance, we experimented with Midjourney using simple prompts to produce abstract images. We love what was created and used them as the final album covers players will see in the game. Everything else was created entirely by our development team. So I don't know, let's look at those music covers and see if they parallel any Magic the Gathering artwork. There's always those AI generated artworks that have like artist signatures and stuff still like embedded in them somewhere because they were on the model where the artwork was kind of modeled after or taken from. So yeah, an interesting story. As long as we're talking about AI, let's move on to this next one. The Finals, which is a game that used AI to generate VO. New update includes solo banquet mode, bug fixes, and more anti-cheat measures. This article is from Game Informer, written by Wesley LeBlanc. Shoutouts, Wesley. It reads, Embark is set to release update 1.5 and a new limited time mode, Solo Banquet, tomorrow, January 17th. Embark calls this mode an experimental one, pitting 12 single players against each other in PvP matches. The first to obtain a total of 40,000 cash wins takes home the win in Solo Banquet. Embark is fixing plenty of bugs and making balance changes as well, plus update 1.5 comes with a security update to anti-cheat and fair play, and a store update too. I mean, Wesley pretty much put all the news in the headline here. If you're playing the finals, look out for the update. Lastly, we've got your feel-good story of the day. Games Done Quick is going on right now, and a dog has entered the charity event as a speedrunner alongside his owner. That is Peanutbutter, the Shiba Inu. I believe it's a Shiba Inu, and his owner, JSR, who sped-run Gyromite, which is a game I had as a kid, so it's super fun to watch a dog play it. You can see he's got like a custom controller, and then, you know, on command, he can press the button and hold it down and let it go. So yeah, Games Done Quick continues to surprise every year. I feel like that's the feel-good story of the day. That's all the stories I got for today. Thank you so much for watching. Sorry if I rambled at all or this was like too long. I'm still gonna be working on the formula and getting this stuff a little bit better as I go through, and it's all gonna be kind of a learning process as I kind of do a lot of this on my own. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll try to make another video tomorrow or the next day.